Hey there guys, we're taking a look at Batman Arkham Asylum running on the AMD Ryzen 5 5500U. Now we've taken a look at this game before, but it was with 8 gigabytes of RAM, though it ran pretty well like that. But I wanted to see what it would do like in 16 gigabytes of RAM, since I know that a lot of you guys have 16 gigabyte systems. So we can see if there's any uplift from that and what the different types of TDP will do for the performance. Now I'm just doing some challenge modes here just because it's easy to get a replayable experience there. And right now what you're looking at the game running at 1080p with the max graphics settings, which is pretty much the very high preset. Everything is pretty much turned up to the highest that it will go. And of course, we're running here at the stock 15 watt TDP. The performance that we're getting here is pretty great in terms of the averages, though the 1% lows are a little rough there. But it's usually just moments like this when there's cinematic moments in the fight happening where you'll see that the frame times will actually spike up. But during the actual gameplay, it's usually not too bad. But it can be rough in certain parts, but overall, it is a playable experience, and at the stock TDP it is going to be an enjoyable enough experience, especially if you're just playing through the campaign and stuff like that, though there are some pretty open areas throughout that might give you performance issues, but those areas really have minimal action compared to the interior areas where really is where most of these types of fights will happen. So the big open areas really are not that common throughout the gaming experience in this game. So I'm really expecting to actually start to see performance issues as we move through the rest of the franchise here, but Arkham Asylum is a absolute champion, and I think most people will be perfectly happy to play the game like this. Though of course we can try out the other TDP settings to see if we can't improve the overall experience here, especially when it comes to those 1% lows. So let's take a look at the different TDP settings running on this chip. So at the 8 watt TDP, the performance that we're getting here is pretty rough. We're looking at pretty much a 30 FPS average with 1% lows that are really struggling here. You'll look at the frame times and you'll see that pretty much anytime any major animations are happening, there will be spikes that are going to be noticeable throughout the gameplay. So overall, this is really not going to be a playable experience at all. I was kind of surprised to see how bad it was here considering how old this game is, but it really was struggling here, and it just really seems like the 5500U struggles with a lot of these AAA games, even when they're older, running at this low of a TDP. And I'm now curious to see how the 5600U would actually handle this, because it might do much better than this at the 8 watt TDP. I'm very curious. I might give that a go actually. Let's take a look at a TDP that people would actually realistically use. So with the balanced preset and a target TDP of it, which is around 25, anywhere between 22 to 25 watts. It really seems to fluctuate a lot, but that seems to be what it's going for. With the balanced preset in the APU tuning utility, we're pretty much getting a much better experience here in the sense that the 1% lows are greatly improved over where we were at the stock TDP. And it's a whole world of difference compared to where we were at the 8 watt TDP. So this is actually a playable and very enjoyable experience here. We're getting very solid 1% lows, but overall, I would say that the experience is just going to be fantastic. This is realistically how I would play this, and if you look at the temperatures, they're actually not even really that high, and it makes sense because the GPU, while being at 100% utilization, the CPU is barely doing anything at all. One of the benefits of this era of gaming is just the fact that since games were so single-threaded back then, these multi-core CPUs that we have now honestly are barely utilized at all while playing these games, while also giving you better IPC than really any CPU that was out at that time. The level of performance that we're getting here is just going to be phenomenal compared to what people were playing these games at back then. And yeah, I get it, the game's old, but are you gonna sit here and tell me that Arkham Asylum isn't a fun game? That's psychotic. That would be psychotic to think that this is not a fun game. I mean, really, how old it is really does not affect it at all, in the sense that it's still going to be a super fun experience. And I mean, if it runs this well on here, why would you play this instead of a newer game that's just gonna run worse? So overall, I'm really impressed with this, but of course we still have the performance TDP to take a look at. And at the performance setting, we're running at a TDP target that is anywhere between 28 to 30 watts, though it's not really going to see anywhere near that level of utilization most of the time here, just because again, the GPU is doing almost everything here and the CPU is hardly doing anything. So all of that extra power really has almost nowhere to go other than just boosting that single core to as high as possible, which you'll see sometimes it goes all the way up to 4 gigahertz. So I'm just happy overall to see that it actually performs super duper well here, in the sense that the 1% lows are as close to 60 as we've seen so far. The experience is so insanely smooth. Now the game itself has actually a hard-coded cap of essentially 62 FPS. You can't really go past that. I don't know if you can actually adjust any files for that, but at least going by what we're getting here, the level of performance is just going to be amazing. And the temperatures that we're at, actually not that bad. Again, the fact that the CPU is not really being utilized and it's all on the GPU lets temperatures not reach anything ridiculous, though 80 might be a little high depending on what your ambient temperatures are. I mean, I had my AC blasting while playing this, so overall I was in a pretty cool environment. If you're in a hotter region, which I know a lot of you guys are, I mean, I'm literally in Texas, so that's a pretty hot region as it is, and the humidity is brutal. But of course we have AC here, and I know a lot of you guys don't have that, so I really would not risk cooking my hardware just to be able to get this level of performance, because the game was still playable at the stock TDP. And if you can't run it like this, the temperatures that I was getting at the balanced preset were also perfectly fine. It really depends on your region, but it might be perfectly doable for you, and if that's the case, then you're going to have at that point a much better time. But if you're stuck with just using the stock TDP, don't even worry about it too much. Honestly, the 1% lows look bad in terms of the numbers, but while playing it, it's still perfectly fine. But anyways, I want to thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you guys in the next one.